Um, so my name's Adam Sparks. I'm the co-founder of Short Answer, and I'm super excited to be hosting our winter webinar with Christine Teahan and Alexandria Chalonec of the Writing Revolution. So to start a little bit about Short Answer, if you're not familiar with it. So at Short Answer, we work to make writing across the curriculum easy and effective through short form, social, research aligned writing activities for any subject. And you can use Short Answer for free at myshortanswer.com. And as a part of our work at Short Answer, we lead workshops with schools across the country on the adjustments that we think need to be made to K-12 writing in the wake of AI. And we also host quarterly webinars like this one on important topics in K-12 writing instruction and assessment. And so to that end, I'm super excited to be joined by Alexandria Chalonic and Christine Teahan. So Alex and Christine are co-directors of academics at the Writing Revolution. The Writing Revolution is a nonprofit that works with schools and departments of education across the country to improve student literacy and learning outcomes through writing. They train teachers and school leaders in the Hockman method, which is a set of explicit, evidence-based strategies for teaching writing that we're super excited to dive into and talk more about tonight. Christine is a former special education teacher who taught middle school English, math, science, and social studies. And at the Writing Revolution, she works with schools and coordinates the development of courses, webinars, and other offerings. And Alex is a former English language arts and social studies teacher like myself, who now works with partner schools at the Writing Revolution. And she also led the process of embedding the Writing Revolution strategies into Louisiana's Department of Education guidebooks, which I'm excited to talk more about tonight because there were some recent results released in Louisiana that were super positive that I'm excited to dive into. So, Christine and Alex, welcome. I'm super excited to be with you. How are you all doing this evening? Um,
Great.
yeah,
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having us tonight, Adam.
Yeah,
of
so nice to be
course.
here.
Where are you all joining from, just so we can like ground ourselves in place, I guess.
I am joining from Northern Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C.
Amazing.
And I am in New York, just north of New York City.
Amazing. I'm in Palo Alto, California, where the sun is still out, and it's also 70 degrees today. So
Ah,
Beautiful. Beautiful. Brag about it.
okay. So I'm super excited to talk with you all tonight. So here's kind of the general structure that I want to follow. So like the first half of the webinar, I want to talk about why should we teach writing? So like the why. And then I think kind of the second half, I want to talk about how we should teach writing. So that's kind of the general structure. And so I want to start at like a 10,000-foot level of like, um, I currently live in Silicon Valley. So I'm zooming to you from a dorm room at Stanford because my wife's a grad student here. She studies data science. And in Silicon Valley, people are very excited about AI at the moment. And they are so excited that it's been suggested to me multiple times when I tell people like, hey, I'm Adam, I'm building this writing tool called Short Answer. And people are like, why are you building a writing tool? Like writing is not a relevant skill anymore. Like literally, like we don't need to teach writing anymore because AI can do it for us. Um, and it scares me how much I've heard that and how influential some of the people saying it are some of the people that are saying it are. So I want to start there. Like just before we get into how we should teach writing, any of that, like should we teach writing anymore? And like why? And I don't maybe whoever is compelled to go first, but we can just make it a conversation from there.
Yeah. Gosh, you got my heart like pounding out of my chest with that one. I'm going to try to keep it calm.
Yeah.
Of course, we should teach writing, and you know that because of what you do for a living. The thing is that the people in Silicon Valley and many people, they are going to tell us to get with the times and let the robots do the work. And then there's going to be the other side of the spectrum, people who will hold on to writing and the human element of correspondence forever and ever. And we're not here to tell you what's right or wrong when you're a grown adult and you have those choices. If you get through high school and you decide you're never going to write another thing ever again by yourself, that's great. Good for you. That's your choice. But the fact is that we are educating children in a generation where these new generations are going to become adults, and we don't even know what the world is going to look like. It's rapidly changing.
Right.
And we are bombarded by information that our brains are not equipped to handle in real time.
Yep.
And one of the beautiful things about writing is that it actually helps students, especially, but people in general, to pause and think about the topic that they are learning about, that they're reading about. And that is an essential component in developing critical thinking skills. And
Yep.
we need these children that we are educating to grow up and be critical thinkers. We really need them to be able to navigate this world in that is filled with this information. Even if technology can assist them with all their jobs when they get older, they still have to vote. They still have to make decisions as citizens in our society. And when they're bombarded with misinformation and they don't know how to process or discern that will end up obviously in disasters. So thinking critically and just understanding things, that is huge. And so much of that actually comes from writing instruction.
Right.
Yeah. And if I could just add to that, Christine got us at that 10,000 foot view. If I could just take us to like a 5,000 foot view. So still big picture, we know that, the research tells us that writing about what you're learning improves understanding and also your ability to retain the information that you're learning. So when teachers are able to embed writing into the learning process, it's actually supporting students learning that content, right? You can't think if you don't have anything to think with. So you've got to build that in, and writing plays such a critical role in building the knowledge in those small chunks around, critical topics students are studying in school and learning about, deepening their thinking. So when writing is embedded in the instruction that students have in school, it's not just building their writing skills, it's building their critical thinking skills, as Christine mentioned. It's building their knowledge around key topics. It's building their reading comprehension, oracy, oral language development, all of those things simultaneously. So if AI is used to bypass students doing those writing tasks, it's also bypassing all of these other really important benefits of writing.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with both of you. And it can sometimes be hard to make that point in conversations with folks out here, but 100% agree with everything you just said.
It's just different to think about it when you're an adult and you have those decisions versus when you're a child learning, those are two very different worlds.
Yeah. So if I can summarize, it's like writing is thinking. And I don't think we want to outsource or get rid of thinking. I think that is a faulty.
Terrifying.
I personally don't want to,
No, I don't either. And yeah, there's a lot of debate around what the term AI literacy means. But I saw it suggested, I think it was from Jane Rosenzweig, who's the head of the Harvard writing. Oh gosh, I don't know the exact name of it, but she does amazing work in writing at Harvard. And she was like, and don't quote me exactly on this, but I'm paraphrasing. It was like AI literacy to me is like having an understanding of the things AI is saying and outputting so that you know how to make sense of and use those tools. So if you don't ever actually develop that background knowledge, to your point, Alex, or if you don't develop those skills to be able to write, you're going to be able to prompt this machine to do this thing for you, but then you're going to have no idea how to use that output, which is scary when you think about the societal implications of that. So all that to say, writing is important and not something that we should get rid of in K-12 schools.
Possibly more important than it ever was.
100%. Yeah. When you think about the value of everything that you just talked about, critical thinking, literacy and how important literacy is in any content area, regardless of ELA or whatever. So writing is critical. So then that leads to my second question is like, if writing is so valuable, why does it seem to be always be a secondary priority? There's been a huge movement around literacy in the last 5 years, specifically this like the science of reading movement, and like over 40 states have passed new laws around like kind of doubling down on K-12 literacy. But almost always those are, I don't want to say almost, but oftentimes that is focusing almost only on early childhood phonics instruction. And writing is sometimes not even mentioned in some of these initiatives. So why is it that it seems to me, and I'm curious if you agree with that, but like, why does it seem that writing is always a secondary priority within literacy initiatives?
Yeah, we do see that too. And we are always asking the question of why not writing? That piece is so important. We see state, initiatives that are really doubling down on reading, which is phenomenal. But we know that when reading instruction is paired with writing instruction, it really, actually lifts both. And, I think we can all probably think to many of these. There's so many myths that exist in education where you try to trace it back and you don't really know. It's not founded in research. It's just sort of founded in like teaching mythology. And one of those things is that if you just read more, if you read more, then you're going to be able to write better, because I guess somehow kids are supposed to, mimic the writing style of professional, like, professional writers who develop their craft over time. There's a lot of that kind of read the sentence and now write one similar to how Faulkner writes. Like, okay, good luck with that. But it's really difficult to reverse some of those reading, some of those myths. And yet they're very pervasive. So there's an emphasis on reading almost as if it's going to bleed into writing as well. We also know that, reading and writing, while reciprocal, they really require their own separate instruction. And so schools have to focus their attention. Teachers, educators can only really onboard and implement kind of one initiative at a time. Yep. And so to do that and to do it well, it makes sense that there's a focus on reading. But there does need to be that kind of supplementary and equal but separate time that's given to writing, where those two can shine together and be integrated.
Right.
Yeah. And the other thing is, like, in addition to that, because part of it is the science of reading curricula are, a lot of them say they have writing and they don't, and we can talk about that later. Right. But there's like a huge focus on standardized testing. And these tests are made for a very specific purpose in collecting data, right, and tracking it over time. And we know that tracking, you can measure how a student is reading, because you can can they name all their letters? Do they know all the letter sounds? Can they read nonsense words, CVC words? So there's a lot of ways to easily track that, to quantify that. And the same with math, can they perform these particular tasks? Yeah. And those two types of standardized tests are widely used because, hey, they're easy to use. They're also misused, but that's another conversation. Right. Writing is so much less objective. It is very subjective. Right. And there's even research that shows that if you are one teacher reading one student's paragraph, you might mark it differently depending on if it's the first or the middle or the last one you correct in that group of papers, or if it's a bad day or a good day, or if you like that kid or not. I mean, like, there's a lot of factors that might influence your scoring. But all that to say that it's also what's important. What are you looking for? Grammar, structure, the actual content, the vocabulary. There's so many things. So it's really hard to assess. And when you don't have something that shows data that screams, this is a need, then, what's the response?
Yeah. Good writing is very subjective, right? And so, I hadn't thought about that from that angle of, like, maybe, unfortunately, oftentimes what is measured is what is taught. And because writing is hard to measure, it doesn't show up on state tests as much. And so maybe it's taught less. That's interesting.
And even when it is on state tests, how is it assessed? It's hard. It varies. Let's say that.
Exactly. And so this kind of leads into something else I wanted to talk about. So NAEP scores were released, a month ago, 2 months ago,
recently.
And dire data on reading, dire data on math, not unexpectedly, kind of post-COVID. But we don't have writing data. And one of the co-authors of the Writing Revolution, Natalie Wexler, wrote about this for Forbes, an article. Maybe I'll post this in the follow-up or when we share out the recording and things. But we haven't had NAEP writing scores reported for 13 years, and we won't collect NAEP writing scores again until 2030. So I guess this question is to both of you, like, are we not collecting summative assessment data on writing because of the challenges of how subjective writing is? Like, why aren't we collecting more summative data, and should we be, I guess, is the question. And then I have some follow-ups with that.
Yep.
Yeah. I read Natalie's article in Forms as well, and I thought that she really effectively kind of characterized some of the reasons that this data has been stalled and delayed, and an effort has been made to collect it. So absolutely, we need to be collecting summative data. It's so critically important, because how do you make decisions about effective instructional practices if we don't have any data to measure what is working and where is it working and what are those in those places, what's being done to see those results, or the kind of converse of that, where there are gaps or where there's stagnation, what's being done, and how do we avoid that? So there's such a need to collect summative data across the country around writing, across the world around writing, because we cannot just rely on anecdotal evidence. And it's what we're really kind of being forced to do, is rely on these sort of pockets of data where we can't make some of those bigger instructional decisions or policy decisions. But we train around 9,000 to 10,000 educators a year, and we hear consistently from these teachers that they need an approach, they need a method to teach writing, because they just don't know how to do it. We are not taught in ed prep programs how to teach writing. Teachers default to a lot of times those teaching myths that they learned in school. So really, without that data, it's hard to point the needle in the direction of what is actually going to work, and what evidence-based practices are going to see those results. Now, we do see through our partner, No More Marking. They're an organization based out of the UK. Yes.
Just going to mention them. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. We use them for they're our assessment partners for writing. And for those folks who might not be familiar, they use a method called comparative judgment to assess writing, which is much more reliable than absolute judgment, like using a rubric, to the point Christine mentioned of how subjective that can be from one person to the next when using rubric scoring. And we work with No More Marking in a program called Assessing America's Writing. And so schools across America can participate in this and use TWR, the Writing Revolution's writing prompts, and they can assess their students' writing up to 3 times a year. And so that, is a movement in a positive direction to be able to get a sense of how are students performing at these kind of benchmark times in the year, and being able to compare it to peer schools and seeing, where is the needle moving, and how are initiatives that have been put in place actually working towards seeing that kind of growth or not.
Yeah. No, I'm so glad that so Dr. Daisy Christodoulou, who runs No More Marking, is amazing. I met with her, and
yes.
Comparative judgment blew my mind. I mean, just to be clear, comparative judgment is the core of Short Answer, the platform.
Yeah, right.
Daisy uses comparative judgment for summative assessment, which I think is brilliant. We're using it, having kids do it for formative assessment purposes. So a little different angle on it. But yeah, the simple insight is just when you put two things together and say, which of these two, which one is stronger? We can establish much more reliable iterator reliability, and take something that otherwise is very subjective and make it very, I don't want to say objective, but a lot more consistent in the way that it scores. So I think comparative judgment is powerful and underutilized, and I'm excited to be hopefully putting it out into the world more through Short Answer. But I also love Daisy's work, so I'm glad that we double clicked on that.
Yeah.
And then I think it's something that deserves to be mentioned here, because increasingly, so Sam Sanchez, who is an instructional coach at Northside ISD. Sam, if you're in here, we're glad to have you. And shout out to Northside in Texas, large school district in Texas. Texas put writing on the state test recently, and it's across the curriculum. And they're somewhat controversially, I would say, they're using AI to score it. Not all of it. But like a portion of the students' responses are scored with AI. And I think that's partly why a large state like Texas is able to put writing on a state test. And so on the one hand, I'm excited by it because it has created a lot of urgency around writing instruction in the state of Texas. But then it's also a bit concerning because you read research, and there was a study, oh man, I'll have to put it in the notes because I don't have it with me now. Paul Graham, who's a very influential writing researcher, was on this study, and it was on like basically, can AI score writing? And for low stakes formative assessment purposes, the results were yes. But for high stakes summative stuff like a state test, the results were no. And yet we have one of the second largest state in the union is using AI to score student writing. And so I do think that there's a future where AI can potentially be an objective score of writing. I don't know if we're there yet. And so I think an approach like No More Marking and comparative judgment is a much better way, frankly, to get that data so we can see if kids are growing in writing on summative tests, but hopefully in a way that's a bit more reliable and accurate.
Yeah.
I don't know if
And
you have
so,
reaction to that. Go ahead. Yeah.
oh, I do.
Please
Um,
do.
I mean, first of all, you get me talking about assessment, formative assessment. That's how you and I met, Adam. We were talking about formative assessment. That's like my jam.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Daisy also has a blog. I would encourage anyone who watches this to afterwards just go check out Daisy Christodoulou's blog, because she speaks to this a lot. And there's very few people on earth who know more about writing assessment than Daisy. And she recently, so at No More Marking, they do a lot of research, and they work with schools in Australia, New Zealand, and the United States of America, to just kind of build up what is this thing. And the thing that they're doing right is they're taking their time. It's so easy to have, oh, this is brand new tool. It makes life so easy. Let's be the first to put out the product that people are going to want to use. But none of those products are good because it's rushed. I played around with some of the AI tools, especially in that first year or two after ChatGPT came out, that were used for teacher planning, and they were not great. I mean, like a lot of mistakes. You have to know what you're looking at, but it was basic, and it wasn't anything that I would really even care to use. And Daisy has been doing research on AI and assessment. And more like a couple of years ago, it was a big absolutely not. And more recently, it's more of a actually let's combine the two. Let's use AI and the human element. And they're really working on trying to develop a way to use the technology to make it large scale, and also make sure that we aren't just leaving it up to the robots to make all the errors and not recognize them.
100%. I think there's a ton of potential around AI to potentially help us scale best practices. I don't know if y'all want to speak to that or not, but I know it's something that we're considering at Short Answer. Short Answer is not an AI platform. We're a peer-to-peer platform. And we do that very deliberately because I think having an authentic audience for student work is ultimately one of the most motivating things for kids. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to write something and share it with my classmates. And I never want to lose that because I don't know. Frankly, I don't know if it's as motivating for a kid to just submit their writing to a chatbot and see what the chatbot says. I think kids are a lot more keenly interested in knowing what other humans have to say about what they wrote. And so partly why we've kind of doubled down on that at Short Answer. But yeah, is there anything else in the AI sphere that you would like to talk about before we kind of move into the how of writing?
I will say, we've been partnering with a company that's called NIIT, and don't ask me what that stands for. I just know them as NIIT. But we are working very closely with them. They're one of the world leaders in developing tech platforms, learning management systems for training, and they're helping us to revolutionize our services. And we are going to be incorporating AI, not for assessment, at least not yet, but at least for developing activities, just to be able to input content and have the bot be able to tell you, like, first of all, if you make the activity, how it does, and then make one for you. But more to come on that. We are going to incorporate AI, but we didn't want to jump on that so quickly because it really needs the time and thought and care, because the kids are at the other end of it. And you can't lose sight of that. You can't just pick the easy thing and run with it. Teaching is never going to be easy, I don't think, at least not in my lifetime. So it's been a long journey, but we are headed there because we know it can make life easier, but let's let it make life easier in a way that also helps our students learn as best they can.
And 100%. If I can just kind of add on to what Christine said, one of the things that we know from working with lots of teachers and implementing the Hochman method is that one of the challenges is where to embed it in their curriculum, or where to embed it where it's really helping to meet that instructional objective, or the objective of whatever the teacher wants the students to walk away from that part of the lesson. And so we were really intentional with thinking about how can we leverage AI to help make the Hochman method easy to use and easy to implement. And so that was that space where we saw, okay, this is where this might be at the place where teachers decide to do it or not to do it, because it's kind of that pain point, that hard piece. So we're excited to see how this comes along and this tool develops, so we can really support teachers with easing the parts of the process that take a lot of the time, but they're still the ones in control. They're still the ones that are making the decisions, that are able to be responsive to what those next instructional moves need to be. But it's using AI thoughtfully to help advance, the learning effort.
Yeah, yeah. The expression we use in our workshops, and that I totally, and I cite this in our workshops to be clear that I'm stealing from Stanford's HAI, Human-Centered AI Research Lab, is AI in the loop, but teacher in charge. Like
Yes.
ultimately,
Great.
the person that needs to be in charge is the teacher.
Yeah.
They should be
Yes.
making the final decision when it comes to anything, instructional decisions, the content you're putting in front of kids, whatever.
Yeah.
And I do want to pause real quick because you just brought up oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name of the method that we're literally going to
Oh,
talk
the
about.
Hockman method.
Thank you,
Yes.
the Hockman method. You just brought up the Hockman method, and I want to jump into it. But first, I want to shout. So Chris Prince, who's secondary ELAR director at Bernie ISD, put in the chat that Texas is using an automated scoring engine. So they have their own system. It's not just like ChatGPT out of the box. So I
Right.
want to make sure I don't misrepresent what Texas is doing in the state. But so yes, thank you, Chris, for shouting that out, and I appreciate you being here. So yeah, so okay, so I think that we've established that writing is important. I think we've established that it's something
We're
that
aligned.
yes, we are aligned in that belief. We've established that it's something that should be measured, that should be a point of emphasis. So then, okay, we've got a district that's all bought in and we want to do more writing. What should that writing instruction look like? Like how should we teach writing? Like, could you tell us more about the writing revolution's approach and the Hockman method?
Happily. It's what I do for a living. Okay, so we always joke around too when we or ask questions like this, and we can't just sit here and talk to you for 3 hours about what we do. So it's like that. How do we sum this up? Basically, how a student is going to learn writing is not dissimilar from how a student is going to learn just about anything. It's that writing is more difficult than most things are going to learn because there is so much nuance. There's so many different discrete skills all combined. And there's also the transfer of that skill across content. And there's also the content they have to know to be able to write. There's so much. It's complex. It's hard. But like anything, and we can dive into some cognitive load theory and just research on how people learn. One of the things that anyone really needs is that they need things to be broken down into manageable chunks, right? Can't learn it all at one time. Can't just learn how to write a paragraph. Have to learn all the building blocks to get to that paragraph and automate as much as you can on the way. And so what the Hockman method does is just that. It takes this massive task, right? Let's not even go to the essay. Let's just talk about a paragraph, which involves so much that we don't necessarily think about when we tell a student to write a paragraph. And it breaks it down into all its component parts. It talks about a topic sentence, sentences, a concluding sentence, and then even further still, we spend a lot of time teaching at the sentence level. And we teach the skills of, the different sentence types, how to use an appositive in your sentence, how to use a subordinating conjunction at the beginning of your sentence. There's Dr. Hockman, when she developed this method, she really just took that massive task and broke it down into these manageable chunks that teachers can, scaffold up and down to meet the students wherever they are. As long as the students need it, there is a way to decrease what it is they're focused on and what it is they're learning. And then you build up from there, always incorporating previously learned skills. So it's very carefully sequenced. It's very scaffolded. It is cohesive. And it incorporates really important skills along the way, like note-taking. We directly teach revision. It's one of the most important skills you could possibly learn is to go back and how to apply those skills, to your paragraph that you wrote to make it better. That's not something we learn innately. There's note-taking. We really place a heavy emphasis on note-taking because it is such an important learning skill. And it's just an incredible approach. And it is something that can be applied across content. And I taught math, I taught science, I taught social studies in addition to ELA, and I used this method. I worked at a school that used it across the content and grades. And it's such a great way to help students structure their thoughts and responses. Just this evening, or earlier this afternoon, I was helping my son with his math homework. He's in 4th grade, and he was told to explain. And he was sitting right next to me, and he said, this answer it makes sense because, and he's like, because I did the math. Do I have to explain this? And it's like, of course, that's what he thinks. That's very natural. How do you explain that the answer I just got makes sense? I figured it out. So we had that was a whole process. But it gives that structure. And so when teachers across content are using it, one other thing it does is bring cohesion to a school environment and to learning in general. It brings teachers together. It breaks down silos. It just creates a common language for instruction across grades and content, in addition to taking this massive task and breaking it down so manageably.
Yeah. Yeah. And to that point, because this is something, Alex, you talked about earlier of like, it can't just be more writing practice. And that's something we kind of have to combat because our goal with short answer is more writing practice, but it also has to be the right kind of writing practice. We have to actually teach kids how to write before we just ask them to do more writing. Because the point, Christine, of like writing is incredibly cognitively complex. There's so many layers to it, and it's got a lot of interconnectivity, and like you have to understand these skills before you can do these skills and that sort of thing. That if we just say do more writing, it's just like it can actually hurt learning because it's so cognitively overwhelming it overwhelms kids' working memory when they're trying to think about content or they're trying to do their fourth grade math problem.
Exactly.
And there's research to support that. And again, this is going to have to be one of those studies that I cite in the blog post that we share out of this recording afterwards. But it was a meta-analysis of writing across the curriculum initiatives, and I think in like 18% of those initiatives or something like that, it hurt learning. Like it had a negative impact on learning. And I think I might even be parroting Natalie Wexler again here of like it hurt learning. Well, I don't know if they actually said this in the research, so I don't want to misrepresent this, but I would suspect in large part because if you're not actually showing the kids how to write and you're just saying do more writing, all of a sudden we're just like overwhelming their working memory when they're trying to do different tasks across the curriculum, and of course it's going to hurt learning. So I think that's something that's brilliant about your all approach, your approach with the Hockman method. It's like explicit writing instruction. Let's break down the skill and build up, piece by piece.
A big sort of mantra that we have is it's so important to focus on the process and not that end product, because that's something that we see. I mean, starting really early, starting in second grade and third grade, that students are expected to produce more pieces of writing, like more essays, more paragraphs. But when you teach the process, right, when you teach that carefully sequenced process of building from sentence to outline to paragraph, then students learn the process. Then that's when you can start extending the response to multiple paragraphs. But if you never teach that process, how is more going to get you any better result than just a pile of poorly written, more poorly written paragraphs? Nobody needs that. No teacher needs that on Sunday night.
Yeah. And speaking of cognitive load theory, like part of the challenge of leading these webinars is having an engaged conversation with you all, which we are right now, and I'm really enjoying it, and also trying to monitor this chat and like all the things that are going on over here. So two things I want to quickly call out, and it's in the chat. So Anna Zyla, welcome, Anna. It's great to have you here. Asked about Daisy's blog that we referenced earlier. Daisy's blog, I just put it in the chat. Is No More Marking. It's the No More Marking Substack, but it's now in the chat, so please check that out because it's fantastic. And then Megan Hensley, welcome, Megan. We're glad to have you. I think this was probably in response to the Texas using AI to score student writing piece was like, it's already better than the college students that we typically hire to score student writing. So yeah, like the baseline may have already been pretty low, so maybe it's better in that sense. But I think it does speak to that the ongoing challenge of how do we score summative writing, or how do we
and keeping in mind that those college students probably had writer's workshop as a kid and don't actually have the skills they need themselves, especially to assess writing a lot of the time.
Right. So anyway, sorry, I don't mean to detract from the amazing work that you're all doing because the Hockman method is great. And so I think within that, so there's been this, to kind of go back to this big push recently around the science of reading that was has been a big push across the country. It's been over 40 states that have passed laws in response to the science of reading movement. And Natalie Wexler, to reference the co-author of the Writing Revolution, just put out I think it was with ASCD, a blog post that I will again cite once we share this out, the recording, about how we're too narrowly defining the science of reading. Like the science of reading is too narrowly defined, essentially. And we need to expand it to a science of literacy. Um, can you all speak to that? Like what is this science of literacy? Because I do think that the methods that you just described are a part of, or at least a
Mm-hmm.
piece of that, of a larger, hopefully, movement that needs to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. We have to find our champion of that. We have to find our Emily Hanford of writing, honestly. There are people just like there's people out there who want to use terminology like science of writing. People throw around science of reading and they misuse that too. Like the terminology just it's so catchy, but really what we need to talk about is what is literacy, and how reading and writing are reciprocal skills. I mean, they go hand in hand and one enhances the other. Um, one of the problems here is that there's just not enough research on writing. And part of that goes back to how hard it is to assess. Like the assessment of writing really needs to be changed. And I trust Nowhere Marking is on the verge of really helping us do that. But in the meantime, the research has to catch up. And how is writing researched? I mean, that's a whole other question. You can go into those studies and find all kinds of problems with them. So there's just not enough of the science, but we do know how people learn. That goes back to that cognitive load theory. And literacy skills, I mean, how do you define literacy? I will tell you this. I went on to the website. There's a website that has this really brilliant 18-point system of assessing different states' implementation of the science of, they call it literacy. They say these are the early literacy markers and how states are doing. So after the NAEP scores, they kind of assess, like they show you each state and the different marker. They have 18 markers and they're brilliant. I mean, so much good stuff in there, teacher prep and literacy coaches, and they have all these free resources. And I'm going through this and I'm like, wow, yeah. Don't ask me how New York compares to the rest because it's awful. But then I'm like, but where is the writing? So much good information.
Yeah.
And there, I don't even think I found the word writing.
Yeah.
And it's really, it needs to change. We need someone to come in and change that because it should be the science of literacy. Science of reading was great for letting us all understand that, phonics and phonological, there's other aspects of reading besides just loving it. Right. But now it's time for the next step to be incorporated there.
Yeah, so maybe we should create sold a story, but about writing. So sold a novel. I don't know. Something. And it's going to be all about how writing is being shortchanged in K-12 curricula across the country.
Yeah, let's do it.
What we have also really tapped into is just how, Christine sort of references also how the brain learns. Like, what are just the processes through which people learn information, and then we can tap into those and embed writing instruction. Like that's how we support our teachers with the Hockman method. Is we know that retrieval practice, we know that spacing are just effective learning strategies. So you can embed writing strategically as a form of retrieval practice. So those are elements where, because we're kind of waiting on, and there is a need for more research for better assessment of writing, well, we can at least kind of tap into what we know does work around learning and also effective teaching practices. And so far that's been an attack that we've taken, and until there is more research there, I think that's the path that we'll have to continue to pursue.
And if it looked just now like I wasn't paying attention to you, it's because I was looking to my bookshelf to my left, because I have a book that I really like, and it's called I think it's just called Best Practices in K-12 Writing Instruction. It's by Steve Graham, who's a researcher at Arizona State and is one of the godfathers of K-12 writing instruction. And he wrote the how to teach writing basically for the Carnegie Corporation, or Carnegie Foundation. He's got done a ton of work on writing. And so I would recommend that if you're looking for, okay, where is, just like a collection of K-12 writing research. I wish I had it. I could hold it up for you, but it's not.
Yeah. Oh, we're very familiar with Steve Graham, and he is unfortunately one of the very few who was able to produce all this research. And even that, like a lot of that is high level structure, teaching across content. But when you get granular about teaching like the sentences and stuff like that, there's just not a lot out there, you know?
Yeah.
Yep. Yep, for sure. And I would say too, I mean, to your point of like there needs to be more research on writing assessment. I know he's doing that now because he was one of the co-authors of that study on can AI score writing. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, I mean, there's a huge push for both. Well, I'll just say there's a huge push right now of trying to fine-tune AI models to do more sort of summative level assessment. And it could
Mhm.
be, I mean, I'm sure given how quickly and rapidly AI is improving, maybe in the near future, AI scoring of writing will be a feasible piece, but I don't know if it's there yet, but maybe soon. Um, there was a question in the chat from Kelly. Can you write out the name of the method you are mentioning? I will do so. It's Hockman, right? So it's H-A-C. Help me spell it.
Yeah.
H H-O,
HOCHMAN.
the Hockman method.
Yes. And the organization is the Writing Revolution that disseminates the Hockman method.
Yes, the writing revolution. I'm putting that in the chat now. Thank you for that question, Kelly. And I would encourage folks. So thank you. Sorry, I keep going to the answered tab. So thank you, Kelly, for asking that. And again, if you have questions, if you're here live with us, please put them into the Q&A. And we do have the chat disabled because this is Zoom webinar, so it's a little bit different functionality from normal Zoom. But Q&A is going to be the method through which you can communicate with us. So even if you have a comment, feel free to jump into the QA and post it there, and then we can address it there. And I appreciate those that have engaged so far. Okay, so I'm trying to think of where I want to go with my question set. You know, like the conversation has been so great thus far. A major case that we make to schools, because we lead workshops with schools across the country on how do we adjust writing instruction now that machines can write for us? And a lot of that is just at almost like the syllabus and policy level of like, how do I talk to my kids about AI and what tools can I use to enforce
Mhm.
certain expectations around if they can or can't use AI in their writing? But a big part of our message to schools when we lead these workshops is we need to be embedding more writing across the curriculum to make up for what we think are going to be lost reps at writing as AI is embedded into the iPhone and Google and you name your technology that kids are using on a daily basis. It's going to, I think, result in kids getting less writing practice than they're already getting, and our kids already can't write. And so we need to make up for those lost reps by it can't just be the English teacher anymore. It needs to be embedded across the curriculum. So this is a big part of our push with schools in our workshop. So then how do we do that? Like what are best practices in writing across the curriculum? Because it's easy to say that, but then when you're in a, you're telling the math teacher who already has too much on their plate, oh, by the way, now you need to also do some writing instruction. It's understandable that you sometimes get eye rolls from folks that are outside
Yeah.
of the humanities when you tell them they need to teach writing or at least have writing in their curriculum. So I have my own thoughts, but I would love to get yours on like, how do we get more writing across the curriculum? What are our best practices in writing across the curriculum?
Yeah, love that question, and also love that mission of getting writing across the curriculum. Um, so many places to go on that one. One is, the eye rolls come from, taking my instructional time. It also comes from writing is really hard for most people, and teachers they often tell us, they volunteer that it's something that comes, so it's so difficult for them that even they want to avoid it, right? Students definitely want to avoid it. They say that they hate writing, but they say they hate writing because writing is hard. And teachers often find that to be the case too. So I think there are a few layers of making writing across the curriculum something that is more approachable. One is that just acknowledging that all teachers are literacy teachers, right? In every class, every core subject, students have to read, they have to write, they have to produce oral responses, they have to think about what they are learning. And additionally, since we know how powerful writing is as a learning tool, that we have to also accept that second thing is that all teachers have to be writing teachers, right? Adam, you said it. It can't just be the job of the English teacher. So, okay, so if we can agree on that as a school, with the Hockman method, some of the reasons that we have been successful with getting school-wide implementations across content areas is that it is really not grammar forward, right? Mm-hmm. So we know that embedding grammar instruction within the content that or the context of student writing within the structure of their writing is effective. that takes some of the burden down for some teachers, or that fear of, oh, I forget what a predicate is. Well, it's
Right.
okay. You don't have to know all of those grammatical terminology, because the method really it works without needing to rely on those terms.
Yeah.
So so those are kind of like two pieces. What we have seen be really successful in getting schools to adopt this across curriculum is when it's not only introduced as an ELA initiative, right? When it is introduced as, this is a way we're going to support teaching deeper thinking throughout the school and teaching writing intentionally. So
Yeah.
it is going to be, they're going to become tools that help you deliver on your content. We often say in our training that we're teaching teachers how to revolutionize their content. So wherever you would have done a check for understanding, wherever you would have asked a question, this is where you can pull in a TWR strategy or a Hockman method strategy to do the same. You're doing the same purpose, right? You're assessing what students know, how accurate they are, while you're also deepening their thinking, teaching them explicitly how to write from that sentence level on up, supporting their oral language development, developing richer vocabulary, all these things in the same instructional time.
Yeah.
And so I think what has helped with this sort of adoption is giving teachers an opportunity to just kind of try it out, like low stakes, put it in a do now, and put it in an exit ticket.
Yeah.
And I was just in a school, one of our partner schools in Little Rock yesterday, and I saw this beautiful math lesson where the teacher was incorporating one of our strategies, because but and so, around place value. And she was saying that she was so nervous to do it and wasn't really sure how her students were going to do with it. But they, watching these students in this class, they were able to feel successful because it was just small chunks, and it gave the structure to help support the thinking, right?
Yeah.
Because gives a reason, but changes direction. So is cause effect. It really, that kind of structure made students successful. And we know that the success leads to motivation to continue the writing. So I think that those are some hurdles that we have to overcome. And by giving teachers that space to just try it out in a low stakes way, then they start to see and make connections for how they could use it in bigger components of their lessons, and in teaching kind of core elements. So I mean, the other piece Christine touched on earlier is that when schools adopt that school-wide comprehensive approach to teaching writing, it gives the how.
Yep.
So when you tell them what to do, okay, you've got to do this. It's like, okay, like I know what I should be doing, but how do I do it?
Yep.
This provides the how and the why it's going to be beneficial. So, I think most people are open to something if they can understand the reason and how it's going to help them and guide them there. So
100%. And two things I want to double click on with that, because there are things that we really push in our workshops too, and that we have found to be successful. Short form, right? We're not asking our 12th grade calculus teacher to do a 10-page research paper on calculus.
yes,
Right? It's just, let's do some short form writing practice where you're writing about your content, and the kids are really, and this is the second thing I wanted to double click on, which is paraphrasing what you said. Writing is a way of thinking about content. So just use writing as a means through which you teach your content. So like Christine, what you were talking about with your fourth grader at home, like this is something that I've seen teachers use short answer in a math classroom. They upload a picture of a incorrectly worked equation. And we're in math class here, right? And it's like, okay, I want you to tell me in writing, what did this equation do wrong? And then, as if you were explaining to a classmate, explain to me how you would fix it. And then we're going to provide feedback to each other in short answer, because it's a peer feedback platform, on the quality of the explanation that we provided to one another. And all of a sudden, we've got kids using just short form writing, but as a means to think about content in a math classroom, in a classroom that is traditionally not a place where you see writing. So I think those two things, because again, like you said, the biggest challenge is like, okay, it's one more thing that I got to do. Like, I already have too much on my plate. But if we can just do short form stuff that is part of that common language of instruction that you talked about, Christine, where it's like, especially when you work with an organization like the Writing Revolution, and people, it almost feels like you're all on the same team. You're not in silos anymore. We're all using the same language. It's short form, and it's just a way of getting kids to think about content, but through writing. I think that is the way that we have found to be successful in promoting writing across the curriculum, and I'm hoping we can get more of it as a result.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to add to this. This
Yeah.
is like I just You just said so many things that made me happy. And Alex, first of all, I, as a math and science teacher who use this method, I will say that there's a chunk of this, that one of our obstacles is that the hard work has to be done up front, right? The first year or two of the journey of actually teaching everyone how to be a writing teacher, if everyone's all in, the first 2 years it's a lot of work, but then it just becomes part of what you do. When you get to that point where you're like, oh yeah, the kids write all the time, you already have the students producing language all the time. It's about finding those points in the lesson and understanding where a certain strategy might fit to give them the structure for that answer, or making that an opportunity to practice one of those structures that you've taught. And in a school that does this effectively, where I taught for 11 years, for example, I, as the science teacher and as the math teacher, I was incorporating writing into what I was doing. And having been trained in the method, and also I was a writing teacher, but having been trained in the method, I knew how to support them, but I wasn't giving explicit writing lessons as that math and science teacher. Error analysis is my absolute favorite way to incorporate writing into a math classroom and a science classroom. Misconceptions. The during summer, the sun is closer to the earth, right? Wait, let's explore that, and you can give sentence structure to that. Susie thought the sun was closer to the earth during summer because, so give me the reason why, give me that contrast, because I know that's wrong. And so we had to help her on, whatever. There's so many different ways to do that. Dr. Hoffman, when she gives examples off the top of her head, man, I'm always like, how do you do that? I have to sit and think about that for a second. I haven't gotten there yet. But anyway, and so what happens is when the school is doing that, so the ELA teacher, the writing teacher, is teaching the writing. Yeah. But then if I teach a positives, that's a pretty fancy, sophisticated written language structure that we don't use in our oral language. If the ELA teacher teaches that, and I know as the science teacher that they've taught that, then I can use it. And when we're reviewing vocabulary for the upcoming test, or for, just something that we just recently learned, I can incorporate a positives matching activity using the vocabulary terms, knowing that they've used that in ELA, not having to literally be the writing teacher. So there is that element of it's don't be afraid of that. It's a really helpful structure and a really helpful way to get students talking about and writing about what it is they're learning. And the onus doesn't have to be on you. And it doesn't take extra time once you actually really go with it and understand where it fits into what you're already doing.
And it's great. This is kind of full circle, going back to the original question I asked to start the webinar of the Silicon Valley tech excited folks, which, I'm not trying to throw stones in glass houses. I'm building a tech tool. I like technology. I think it's great, but I do think that there's a spectrum of enthusiasm, and I'm kind of in the middle, and living in Silicon Valley, there is a lot of people that live in sort of fairy tale rainbow land of what AI is capable of. And so to those folks that are like, well, AI, we don't need to learn how to write anymore. I think everything we're talking about here is more proof of why that's not true, because writing is thinking. It's a meaningful way to discuss and think about content in any subject area, not just an ELA class. So hopefully this speaks to and addresses that. Should we teach writing? Yes, we should teach writing.
Yes.
May I address a question in the chat as well?
Yes, please do. Are you going to address Anna?
Yeah, I am. In addition, I just love this. I wish we had another hour to talk about this. My favorite strategy in the method is called the unelaborated paragraph. And the reason I love it so much is because the long-term impact of it is tremendous. So one of the things, Anna, that we do is in the method, what Dr. Hockman incorporated into the method is revision. The way that we teach students how to revise their work draws upon this exact same language that we're using at every other level leading to that point. So they've learned certain sentence level strategies, such as sentence combining and sentence expansion. And then we explicitly teach them how to apply those to writing, that even starting with writing that's not even their own. So we'll say, here's a paragraph, combine these sentences, expand this sentence. And they can pull upon what they've done at the sentence level to do that. And then when you're marking, when they've learned that language of feedback, we call it getting your sundays back. when, like, I can remember when I first started teaching how many hours I spent every single weekend just giving feedback, but my feedback was always rewriting work for the students and they would just passively copy it. And it doesn't even teach them what they need to know. They need feedback that makes them actually think and work. And it's less work on you when you can do that. So when you have that language, all you have to do is say expand. You don't even have to say expand. You can write EXP, right? That's the feedback. And then they know to use the question words to add the details and make that sentence have more interesting information. So that's another one of those things where up front, there's a lot up front, but when you get to the point where like the whole method is working, then you spend hours less of your time actually giving feedback and marking student writing. It's one of the most spectacular benefits of this method.
I just also want to add to that, to address Anna's question as well, or comment, is that so much of this method is meant to be done it's the explicit instruction approach, right? There's a lot of modeling, that co-construction, where the teacher is leading the students through it, guiding, giving the practice, giving the feedback. And so since there are many opportunities to give students sentence level work, then there's a lot of opportunity to give immediate feedback to improve and revise at that sentence level. So students are developing proficiency with those small chunks of writing. So that's going to help to make those paragraphs stronger. So you're able to catch a lot of the errors at just the sentence level. You don't have to only collect the essays and assign all of these paragraphs and essays to grade, these longer pieces, when you can really be building proficiency at that sentence level. And Daisy Christodoulos speaks a lot about this in her, or writes a lot about this in her blog, about the power of whole class feedback. And when you give that whole class feedback on the small chunks of writing, those sentences and the different sentence structures, then you're just, not only are you getting your Sundays back, but you're building student proficiency. You're getting in those writing reps, as you mentioned, Adam. If you're able to do this now across the day, across different content areas, I mean, just imagine the level of feedback, the quality and quantity of feedback on more frequent pieces of writing.
Yeah. I plus one to everything that was just said from both of you. I literally wrote down a Dylan William quote. Dylan William, very famous formative assessment researcher, also advisor to Short Answer, amazing individual. His quote is the feedback. I'm going to paraphrase him. The feedback should be more work for the recipient than the giver.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That might have been like the original impetus for me building Short Answer as my master's project. It was like, because I had the same experience. I taught the humanities, and you spend Sunday giving kids feedback. You come in Monday, you give them the feedback, they ignore all of it, they look at their grade and they move on. And it's just this frustrating experience as an educator. So just how do we get kids to think about feedback? But I think the method is fantastic. One more question and then we'll have to wrap up. But Chris asked another really great one. He said, can you please elaborate on how the Hockman method takes advantage of spacing effects and interleaving? Kind of going back to cognitive load theory type of conversation. And you mentioned it earlier, but I didn't catch it. So anyone want to that?
Yeah, happy to. It's really, first of all, both of those things work in concert, all the things. So the way that Dr. Hockman broke down the method makes for interleaving, things like interleaving and space retrieval easy to implement. You have to know what that means and how best to do that. Interleaving, there's a lot of practices that are good and bad, and you want to make sure that they are the skills that you're practicing, and the pattern that you're using in the different ways, that they are aligned or they are related to each other. They're not just random things. That has more to do with content. But with writing, when you want to like intentionally practice writing skills, maybe you have taught a couple of the strategies already, like you modeled sentence expansion. And then you did some whole class expansion, and then you modeled because, but, and so, and then you did some whole class, but, because, and so, and you modeled sentences and fragments, and then you did it, whatever. So you've gotten that practice, and now you want to integrate it in a way that's like reminding them, oh, remember this skill. We're going to review our homework last night by completing this sentence expansion about the chapter that you read, right? So you are giving them that practice. You're making them retrieve it, by the way, too, that information that they learned the next day. So kind of both things. And then, maybe the next day we're going to start by reviewing that chapter with a sentences and fragments activity. And so the way that the method is broken down just allows for so much more opportunity to do that with the skills, to integrate them just in the way that is going to work and be most effective. And you can concentrate on a small group of skills for a little while and build from there and just always keep growing as the students are ready. Not to mention that so many of those practices also require students to write. That's formative assessment. One of the best ways to do it is get them writing. That's why you do what you do. And so it also just gives the structure for that. So it makes that easier to do those practices in any content.
Yeah. There was another question that came in, and is it okay if we keep going a little bit longer, Alex and Christine?
Yeah.
We're at 9 o'clock Eastern time. I don't want to take your whole night, but one more question. I know I said the last one was the last one, but this will be
It's all good.
And Kelly, thank you so much for participating. She said, "What about teaching how to write commentary?" Yeah, I'm curious your response to that, and maybe Kelly. Well, I'm sorry, I don't know if I can pull you on stage or not. Let me look and see if Kelly's still in here because I'm curious what you mean by commentary.
Yeah.
I could start by just saying that the Hockman method is a method for teaching expository writing, so writing to explain or inform, and that's the type of writing that students are most frequently exposed to in school and kind of beyond school. So we start at that. Kind of with that type of writing, and then also teach students to write for different structures, so problem solution, and to write cause and effect pieces, descriptive pieces. So sometimes we get the question of, well, what about creative writing, or what about teaching students how to incorporate dialogue into fictional pieces of writing. Once we get the foundations built, then those are places that students can go and grow in. But we really start with that kind of most frequently used and called upon approach to writing, and then and then it can be applied once those skills are learned. Then students have that basic structure to then build upon for other types of and forms of writing.
Right. Yeah, it's like building blocks so that you can build up towards those awesome, fun, creative writing tests, right? But
yes.
you have skills first. It's like I love playing guitar. I have my guitar sitting right over here. I won't play for you all. I know, but like, yeah, it's kind of soul crushing. Sorry, it's not so, but it's very challenging to like sit there and just like I got to learn the G chord, I got to learn the C chord, I got to learn the D chord, and it's just kind of. But you have to memorize those things and build up those skills before you can be the Beatles, right? Like you have to build those building blocks. And maybe that's where we'll close, I guess, is like because I do think it speaks to the Hockman method and a lot of what we talked about of just explicit writing instruction, building up those skills piece by piece, so that we can create effective writers who can and effective students who can think critically about the world and can express who they are to the world and what they think to the world. Which is the value of writing and why we need to continue to teach it, even in a world where a machine can write for kids. So I'm going to close there.
Well said. Well said.
I'm so honored to have this. Was awesome. This was just like a total by accident. We met each other at a research ed conference in Delaware a few months ago.
It was destined to be.
Let's have a webinar. But this was amazing, and I love these types of conversations. For folks that are still here watching the recording, we try to do one of these webinars once a quarter. So our next one will be in the next couple months. I don't know who we'll be with, but it'll be a hard. We've set a high bar here, Christine and Alex. Appreciate you. And yeah, thank you all for joining, and thanks for the folks that were here live that interacted with us.
Thank you so much for having us, Adam. This is a pleasure. And yeah, we're happy our paths cross. Hopefully they cross again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you. What a joy this was. Appreciate it.
And thank you to the audience.